Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am super excited for our guest today. He is a seasoned business development executive with a passion for building and scaling companies, dedicated mentor, endurance sports enthusiast, father of 5, held leadership roles in several successful companies and proven track record of driving growth and innovation. Please welcome the managing partner of WorldWorks LLC, Larry Upton. Larry, awesome to have you on the show.
Thank you, Greg. I'm delighted to be here. Appreciate your having me.
So as you know, I love talking about endurance and the endurance mindset. So Larry, how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
You know, that's a great question. Unexpectedly being the key term. My father was a coach, Greg, and unlike you, I'm no spring chicken. So I grew up in the 70s and the 80s where it was the traditional 4: baseball, basketball, football, track. So from a very early age, I'm 11, 12, I was up every morning at 5 o'clock in the gym, 2-a-days, gym in the morning, track session, football workout, whatever it was in the afternoon. And my dad was a big believer in the fact that sports and team sports specifically were a microcosm of life, and that the discipline that one could incur through team sports and learning to be a team participant was basically going to prepare you for academia and university, for professional endeavors, working and leading a team. And I thank him for that. Later on in life, as you mentioned, we have 5 kids. When the last, Brady Bunch, mind you, I did not sire 5 kids. When the last of our 2 boys got to be, I think, second or third year in college, we wound up with a little more disposable time. We were not doing gymnastics. We weren't doing track, lacrosse, soccer every afternoon, every weekend. My wife and I looked at each other and said, hey, what can we do together? Because she's a lifelong athlete, as am I. And wound up getting into triathlon and found that, of all the sports in which I participated over 57 years, triathlon seemed to fit the bill, only in that, to your point, as an endurance sport, it pushes us in 3 different disciplines. And unless you're a Jan Frodeno or a Lucy Charles Barclay, and you're just naturally genetically gifted, and or you grew up swimming, running, biking, it's going to stretch us, and I'm an adult onset swimmer, as we lovingly say in triathlon, didn't really learn to swim properly until my late 40s. So it's been a challenge, but what it's taught me is to push myself to a point of discomfort. There's an old adage about try to do something that you're scared of every day. Well, swimming, anything over 1,000, 12, 1,500 meters, I'm scared of. But I've learned to get in there, go at it, do my best, focus on something that I can take away from that session or that set, and then take that as the microcosm to apply to the macro of life. It's benefited me. It's helped stretch my horizons, taught me to push myself into discomfort. And then, as you well know, as a father and as an executive, that applies in raising kids. It applies in, forging a successful marriage. It applies in creating, leading, managing companies and people. So it's been very, very useful.
So Larry, I imagine that I guess mindset or ability to push to the level of discomfort, that must have started at 5 a.m. as a child. Like that's probably the last thing that any child wants to do. Can you go draw those lines a little bit closer together for us?
Sure. So I grew up in a very rural, small town in South Mississippi. Population 2,100. It was one of those things where we had 3 red lights and a Sonic. So in many senses, as with a lot of your southeastern states in particular, football defined who you were as a young man. Your prowess on the field, whether you had the letter jacket or not, it's just kind of what you aspired to as an elementary, middle school kid, is you wanted to play JV and then you wanted to be on varsity. So one of the things that, my dad was really good about was helping us understand that sports is nothing than an extension of who we were. He was a big believer in the fact that, our physical acumen or gifts weren't necessarily always guaranteed. Greg, I'll be honest, I don't have a fast twitch muscle in my body, including my brain. Maybe my tongue, because I love to talk, but I am a slow twitch pace guy. I can go forever. And in the big four sports, that didn't bode well. So I was always that guy who had to, if the coach was saying we're going to run 10 100s, I had to run 12. If a coach was saying we're going to run 2 miles around the track, I had to run 3. I just had to work a little harder. So from a very early age, I recognized I was not God's gift to athletics. And so I understood kind of early on, age 11, age 12, I had to work a little harder. So yeah, it was not the nicest thing getting up at 5 a.m. at age 12 to go out to the gym. But I also understood that if I wanted to grow and I wanted to try and succeed in sports, then I had to take those extra steps.
Absolutely. You also mentioned getting into triathlon with your wife, and it's ironic because my wife introduced triathlon, and in particular the long distance Ironman racing. So I have to thank her for that burden. And we've done 6 together, and et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully we'll be towing the line again someday soon. But I'd love to hear your side of that dynamic, the husband and wife tackling triathlon, right? Give us a little sense of how that sort of has unfolded.
Sure. So it was, as a lot of things in life, it was somewhat by choice, somewhat by serendipity. So my wife, Cynthia, and I, she's natively Canadian, spent the bulk of our lives in Austin, Texas. I moved there. She moved there in 81. I moved there in 91. Well, when I first moved there, Austin was maybe 350,000, 375,000 people strong. Over the course of the late 90s, early 2000s, as tech companies began to discover Austin, recognized there was no personal income tax, cost of living was far more attractive than the Bay Area, they began coming in droves. So it started in 97, 98. And by the time we left in 2015, it had grown to 2.4 million. Well, interestingly, the city council, being very green, because the city's built on top of an aquifer, Edwards Aquifer, they restricted lateral growth into the green belt. They did not have the foresight to restrict vertical growth. So Austin now has some 32, 33 residential buildings, apartments and condos, over 40 floors high. Wow. So the 2 ways in, 2 ways out of the downtown area. So the density became ridiculous. We had a nice home in the suburbs, raising 5 kids. We sold that when those boys got off to be sophomores in college. Had aspirations of living the adult downtown lifestyle. Got a nice apartment overlooking the city up on a hill, 2.25 miles from downtown. Greg, it was taking me 40, 45, 50 minutes to go 2.5 miles. I could have literally walked home faster than I could drive. At the same time, we were members of a gym chain called Lifetime Fitness. You're probably familiar with them, Florida's national chain. We noticed that on Friday afternoons or sometimes Thursday afternoons, many of our couple friends would take off early from work. They'd drive to Waco, they'd drive to Galveston, they'd drive to Kerrville, get together, have an early dinner on Friday night, get up and race a little sprint or an Olympic triathlon on Saturday, have a margarita, chips and salsa fest on Saturday night, and brunch on Sunday, and I'll drive home. It just looked like it was fun. I was a competitive cyclist. My wife was a lifelong swimmer. It occurred to us that, hey, this is a sport that blends our passions. Both had to learn to run a little bit. So we got into it in 2014, 2015, took to it like fish in water, and then recognized in about 2016 that Austin was just too busy. Wound up moving up to Boulder, which, as you know, is kind of the mecca for all things triathlon. Really got involved at that point. I was managing an OG athlete, guy named Mark Allen. I was managing his business affairs. This was right about when Wanda Dalian bought Ironman. So Mark and I started doing a lot of traveling back and forth to China. That's a whole nother story, but it really entrenched me into the world of endurance sports, in triathlon specifically. Spent a lot of time with a wide number of pro triathletes, kind of learned what made them tick, how they did or didn't succeed. And then eventually that led us to launch the small endeavor of which you're aware now, Bamboo Works.
So I'm curious, was it the move to Boulder that kind of got you into the scene, or is it your competitive cycling? Like, how did that unfold?
Sure. Okay. And I failed to really, distinguish, but we got involved in triathlon in 2014. I, being a technologist, I was managing a software company at the time called MindQuilt, which was a question and answer platform, kind of a predecessor to Slack. If you've ever used Slack for internal corporate communications, four young, bright engineers out of Vodafone, which is an EU-based telco provider, had developed this as an internal communications tool. They spun it out and decided to launch a startup in Austin, Texas, when I was still living there. Eventually, they began working with me. We went out and raised some venture capital, set about developing, again, the predecessor to Slack. But it was the strength of it was the ability to associate meta tags with question and answer sequences. So as I got involved in triathlon, as you probably know from your own exposure, you're faced with one of three things. Either you're going to pick it up on your own, you're going to skin your knees, figure out what you don't know. You're going to get a coach, which, while that's the most accelerated way of improving, is also the most expensive. Or you can oftentimes glom information from off the internet. The challenge with that third portion being that about 3/4 of what's out on the internet is bullcrap. It's some guy who's done a couple of spread triathlons. Maybe he went and got his USA training certification. Now he thinks he's got gift to triathlon coaching. Well, long story short, that was the problem we encountered. We were not rolling in cash. Having put 4 kids through university, we did not have $600 or $700 a month we could spend on a coach. So truth be told, I give my wife credit for this. I was bitching and moaning about the fact that, hey, half of what I'm finding on the internet is crap. She said, Larry, you're a tech CEO. You've got a great question and answer platform. Why don't you develop a repository of this information and figure out how to leverage tech to make it easier to get your questions answered? It was that kind of avenue which led me to meet Mark Allen. Everybody in triathlon, at least anyone over the age of 30, knows who Mark Allen is. He won almost 6 times, ESPN greatest endurance athlete of all time. Just a golden person, and he's been a gift to the sport of triathlon. He and I began working on this because he saw value in this FAQ platform. Wound up asking me to manage his business in 2016. So I did for 2016 and 2017. Through that exposure, we began traveling to China. We were working closely with Ironman, specifically Ironman University, which was just getting off the ground at that time. Mark was one of 5 master coaches associated with that. And the amount of time we spent in China quickly educated me as to how business is done there. I think you and I discussed this in one of our prior calls. It's pretty much everything you read. If you've got a contract, yes, odds are they will find a loophole. They will find a way to screw you. But the conflict is in the Occidental mindset. That's actually honorific. It simply means I'm a more savvy business person than you. If I found a loophole, if I found a way to take advantage of you, it just means I'm better at business than you are. Once I realized that, I started tapping into what really moves the needle in China. And that is the strength of your relationships. There's actually a term in Mandarin called guanxi, which, if you spelled it out in English, is Guanxi. It roughly translates to your network of trust. What it really comes down to is, do I know your boss? Or do I know your boss's boss? Or even better, Greg, do I know the government official over your business sector? Because if so, my guanxi is stronger than yours. And you will not manipulate me or take advantage of me, because I could tell your boss's boss, or that government official, and get you in a lot of trouble. It took about 3, maybe 3.5 years of my going to China, spending time and money and energy developing these relationships. Cynthia, my wife, thought I was crazy. She's like, what the hell are you doing? You're spending 10, 12, 15 days in China. We're not making any money off this. What are you doing? And I had to just tell her, honey, have faith. Please understand, this is how business is done there. And it was through building those relationships that I then began to expand that sphere of influence, began going to triathlon events. 2018, 2019, I took 12 pros over in 2018. 2019, we took 24 pros over to local races in Changsha. I began to get involved with Ironman. At the time, they were holding 5 70.3 races, widely heralded as the next great, the Wild West of triathlon is going to be in China. So all of that to say, it got me very involved in the business of triathlon, which then after we moved to Boulder, segued into what is now WorldWorks and on the side, Bamboo Works. So I know that was a long 45 minutes, but hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really interesting. And where I was teeing off on that is the conversation around building relationships and being intentional about it, right? So what else? And you answered it properly. Did you go to China with the intention of building certain relationships? Like you knew there were people that you wanted to sort of get to know better, and that, or did it just the fact that you were there in the scene, did opportunities sort of bubble up? I'm just kind of curious if it was sort of manifested.
Great question. And again, pardon my 57-year-old memory. I don't recall whether we covered this or not, but the old opposites attract paradigm is very, very evident in my relationship with my wife. My wife is a hard-charging, shark hunter of a salesperson. She takes no enemy or takes no prisoners. She has a nose for money. If it's not there, honestly, she couldn't really care less about the personal relationship. She's a hunter, whereas I'm much more of a farmer in sales terms. I'm more of an account manager. I love to network and build relationships. Early on in our relationship, she even told me once, Larry, you have more coffee meetings than anyone I've ever met. What are you doing? And it set me back at first because it's just who I am. But then, Greg, an analogy came to mind. I don't know if you remember the genre of paintings. This was back in the mid-2000s, 2010, 11, 12. When you first looked at one of these paintings, it just looked like a bunch of dots. Mm-hmm. But when you relaxed your mind, you relaxed your mind's eye, then you made out the form of that's a face, or that's a bowl of fruit, or that's a landscape. Your mind interpolated and connected those dots to form that picture. I then went back to my wife and I said, honey, coffee meetings and initial relationships are like those dots. If you look at them individually, it's a morass. It makes no sense. But in the greater, you step back and you look at it, and now I've got a network. I've got relationships. And that's exactly what happened in China. Initially, I was just going over meeting people at Ironman. And then I started meeting people at Ironman events. And then I met local race directors. I met people from the Shanghai Triathlon Club, 45,000 members in Shanghai Triathlon Club. It's the world's largest. And as I began to develop those relationships, have coffee with them, have a beer with them, a late night whiskey with them, you get to meet their family. It was that strength of those relationships that built that guanxi, which then when I started to see business opportunities, I now had a card I could play. Hey, Chong Jiao, great to see you again. I hear you're organizing an event down in Changsha. Can we get together? Can we talk about that? It just 1, 2, 3 led to that business. And then over the long haul, it's proven a fantastic business avenue, both for WordWorks and for Bamboo Works.
That's awesome.
Not necessarily purposeful, more a reflection of just who I am. But then in retrospect, you can now see the foundation that was built through those relationships upon which you can build a business model.
Yeah, 100%. And it's very similar to my wife and I's approach. She's the sales-driven CEO of a private equity-backed company. Like, it's hard charging, and I'm the hosting podcasts and having meetings, and it's a very much a random walk while you're in it. But when you look back, for me, it's a straight line. Like, all these things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Larry, you're pretty deep in the endurance sports space. Love to know what you're doing now. Like, give us a little bit more insight of WorldWorks and this other companies you're working with, and kind of give us some ideas of what you're doing these days.
Sure. So, hearkening back to what we were just discussing, those relationships, as I began to develop the network in China, one of the things that quickly became evident was, China being the world's largest middle class. They literally have over 370 million people in their middle class, which is larger than the United States' entire population. The government there has recognized, because they are a communist government, that they're responsible for social health care. They've also recognized the fact that with the increasing westernization of the Chinese diet, obesity, type 2 diabetes is going to become a problem. So they've begun investing heavily into health and wellness infrastructure there. Understanding that, a pain point in the market, understanding the fact that very few of my Western compatriots understand China, how to do business in China, have a network in China. My initial go-to-market back in 2018 was helping United States or EU-based endurance sports companies who wanted to set up shop in China. So we started working with a nutrition firm, started working with an apparel firm, started working with a software firm who all understood there's this monstrous market in China. It's going to take some work to get my product, my service, my offering ready for a Mandarin-speaking Eastern mentality market. So that was the initial go-to-market. Went very well for about 18 months. And then you and I both know what happened in 2020. The world closed up. I could no longer go to China. I could not really take products or services to China. So there was a good 12 to 15 months there, 2020, 2021, where we just had to shut things down. When we reopened, as you well know as well, there was a strong anti-China sentiment here, not just in the US, but in Europe as well. So the whole model of taking United States or EU-based companies to China, I could just tell it wasn't going to fly. What we could do, though, was take companies either who are based in China or who are based in the EU, and they want to open up shop in the United States. You know, we are arguably the world's top endurance sports market, not just because of our numbers, but just because of the rapidity with which products can get to market, prove out a business model, and then either succeed or fail. And I mean, it's across the board, whether you're talking about nutrition, apparel, wearables, and technology. You know, companies around the world aspire to launching in the United States endurance sports market. So that's what we do today. You know, we worked with a couple of companies that you may be familiar with, initially Athletic Greens, now they're called AG1. We helped them launch in the United States. There's a company that does, drip, guaranteed no drip goggles called the Magic 5. They're a Danish company. We helped them launch in the United States. Currently working with a Canadian-based goggle provider called Form. You may know them. They're the ones that project onto the inside of your goggles, your swim, your course, your pace, things like that, working to help them develop their U.S. brand presence. Did a 6-month engagement with a wetsuit company called DeBoer, who make the Ferrari of wetsuits. They're $1,500 wetsuits, and they really are superior in technology. They're based out of the Netherlands. So we helped them launch in the United States. So kind of our whole raison d'etre at WorldWorks is helping foreign domiciled companies who've got a top tier industry leading product, brand, or service, but who want to grow brand awareness and consumer engagement in the United States. That's what we do.
That's awesome. Because to your point, there's so much innovation, technology, just all across the globe. And how can you penetrate into this US-based market? So let's flip that question, Larry. We've got an audience member who has got a bright idea of a new product, a new gadget, new wearable, new nutrition, and they're thinking about launching into the endurance industry. What sort of guidance would you give him or her?
So, Greg, I don't know if you're familiar with a former senior executive at Apple named Guy Kawasaki. Mm-hmm. You've probably seen him. He's quoted all the time. Made $1 gazillion in the first 4 or 5 years at Apple, then got out, and in the 90s he launched Garage.com, which was a small venture capital firm based in Silicon Valley. Guy's always been the guru to whose philosophy I subscribe when it comes to launching new products or services. His whole thesis is that the marketplace is boss. So no matter how good you think your product, service, or offering is, the marketplace will tell you whether it does or doesn't resonate with them. He's also a big believer in not letting better become the enemy of good. So once your product or service is good, he says, push it out the door. take that roll of the dice, get it out to the dogs, see if they like the dog food. And he said, then watch them. If, you've got yellow, red, and orange bits in your dog food, and the dogs are pushing aside everything but the red bits, he said, go back to the formula and crank up the red bits. If they're pushing aside the orange bits and they like the red and the yellow, well, get rid of the orange bits, increase the percentage of the red and the yellow bits. He's a big believer in iteration. So he says, work your butt off, make sure you got a good product or service, get it out to the market, and then watch the marketplace. He said, they are boss. They will tell you. And if you listen closely, they'll tell you what they like and what they don't like. So my encouragement to a lot of these early stage companies is bootstrap it. Don't go give away the house until you absolutely have to. Beg, borrow, and steal from friends and family. Put some money together and try to get a prototype, an alpha version product, and then get it out there. Give it to friends, give it to family members, give it to trusted advisors. Let them give you feedback and then listen carefully. They will tell you what they like and what they don't like. And then go back, iterate, and give it to them again. Keep iterating until you get to the point where the overwhelmingly 90+% of the feedback is positive. And then at that point, start selling your damn product. And you don't have to spin up a $12,000 website. You can do a Shopify website for $500 today. You can do one on Wix. You can do one on GoDaddy. Just get a public face up, hang a shingle, so to speak, and start selling your product. And then again, listen to what the market is telling you. Once you start to see traction, the dogs are liking it, and even better, they're coming back to the bowl for more. That's when we typically engage. We do not get involved in the ideation phase because that's a long, hard process that, requires a lot of time and money. And honestly, it doesn't serve me well as a business consultancy. I want to know, once you've got a product, how do you need help scaling sales? How do you need help identifying and implementing the platforms or systems, be it a CRM, be it a business intelligence tool, be it an marketing automation platform? We want to bring knowledge, expertise, and technology systems to bear to help you scale your back-end sales process. That's where we're most effective.
That's super helpful. Any particular product category that you're excited about these days?
Hard not to be excited about AI, artificial intelligence. I see it every time I log into a third-party software tool. They've now got chat and AI-enabled chat, or if it's like Canva or CapCut, I'm working on a graphic or I'm working on a video. Now I can just literally type in prompts and say, give me an image with X, Y, Z in it, and pretty dang good at what it's spitting out these days. Well, inevitably, that's going to move from software and systems down into CPG goods. Inevitably, you're going to look at a wearable watch and you're going to be able to speak into it and say, hey, here's how I feel, or here's how I perform today, or even better yet, it's going to be able to ascertain from your heart rate, from your glucose levels, from your potassium and magnesium in your sweat. And then through AI, it's going to tell you, hey, you could have pushed harder. Hey, you got to slow down. AI, and specifically AI around wearables, I think is a very exciting space. I mean, you've got some kind of industry leaders who are setting the pace right now, be that Garmin on the watch and computer side of things, Aura, the ring company, Whoop from a bracelet company. Those guys are just crushing it. Hard to deny the Apple Watch is doing equally well, although it tends to be relegated more to the consumer segment. Some of the advances they're making in diagnostics, specifically being able to say, hey, your blood sugar's off. Hey, your potassium levels are off. And then scarily enough, be able to encapsulate that. And now you can send it to your medical provider and they can tell just from your last 7, 30, 60 days of wearing an Apple Watch, what's going on with your health. That's exciting. A little bit scary in areas, but exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting and scary. I mean, I several times a year will do blood work with my primary, and now I find myself loading it into ChatGPT and be like, hey, compare this chart to last year's chart, and what questions should I be asking my physician? And it just empowers you with this information, and it's to your point, becoming more and more real time, right? The fact that Garmin connects with your aura, connects with this, all of a sudden you're kind of, the day is already set for you and you wake up.
You know, an interesting adjunct to that, because I think we both agree that's very exciting. Again, hearkening back to Mark Allen, you know, he's in many senses my hero as an endurance athlete, not just because I call him friend and because he was my former coach and because of his accolades in the sport. One of the things I most respect about Mark is that, much as my father did, he believes that we are comprised as humans of three entities, that we possess an energy, you know, what some in religious terms would call your spirit. It's basically that part of us which is infinite. It doesn't go away. You know, matter never goes away. It just changes form. So Mark believes that we are a base energy form, a spirit. He believes that we possess a soul, not that he calls it a soul, but basically our intellect, our emotions, our character, our memories, those things that make us unique and differentiated from other human beings. And then we just live in this earth suit, this thing that's going to be around for hopefully 80, 90 years. In Mark's philosophy, unlike a lot of other endurance athletes, is all three of those, educating all three of those is an absolute necessity to success. You know, you can be the most fit specimen in the world, you know, you cranking out 400 watts, you know, a 65 FTP, I mean, or VO2 max. I mean, you can just be God's gift to genetic athletics. But if your mind is messed up because, you know, your personal relationships or your finances or, you know, the rest of your life is in disarray, or in, you know, spiritual terms, if your vertical alignment's not in place, if you're not walking in gratitude, if you're not trying to love others as much or more than you do yourself, Mark's philosophy is you're not going to succeed as an athlete. He himself is a walking example of that. Dave Scott beat him 6 years in a row in Kona, you know, and Mark will actually talk about an episode where he was out training on the Queen K, the lava fields were out there, and Mark had running in through his head, if I could just beat Dave Scott, I would be happy. If I could just beat Dave Scott, I would be happy. And he literally had this vision, this realization, this voice, spiritual, spoke to him and said, Mark, you've got it backwards. You're looking at it purely horizontally, competing against another human. Get your vertical alignment in place. Get happy and see what happens in your race results. That was the inflection point. He then went on to beat Dave, you know, next 6 times in Kona. And now his entire coaching philosophy is built around that. Take care of your mind, your soul, your heart, and your body. And that's a big, you know, it's a big kind of a paradigm around which I believe that, you know, life gets good.
100%. I mean, it's, you got to take care of yourself and be happy with your being and what's surrounding you. And, you know, so many of us say, oh, if I just get that one more thing, then I'll be happy. If I just get to $500,000, if I just get the, you know, lose 5 more pounds, then I'll be happy. And it's completely wrong. It's backwards. It needs to be, let me get happy first and then see what else sort of reveals itself in life. So you keep bringing up Mark and Dave. I'd love, Larry, any fun Ironman related stories that you could share? Like, what's your favorite over the years of just being in that space with those types of guys?
Sure. You know, I've got some OG stories from back in the early 2010s, you know, when I was first getting into the sport and traveling to Kona with Mark. And then I've got some stories from, you know, my experiences in China with a lot of these young pros that we were taking over from Boulder. And then of late, I've got some experiences, you know, kind of present day where we're at now. So one of the most surprising things about working with Mark and managing his business was just how beloved he is. I don't know if you've been to Kona for the Ironman World Championship, but it is a madhouse, Greg. It's not just the 2,500 or now 5,000 athletes who are racing. It's their friends and family. It's 15 to 20,000 people who descend on this small town. And it's just, it's about as high energy an experience as I've ever encountered. And when I first started working with Mark, Ali Drive is kind of like the big, it's Broadway in Kona. And I can remember vividly walking down that street and having complete strangers, as old as 90 and as young as 10, walk up and tug on Mark's shirt. Mr. Allen, I get picture. Mark, you my hero. Never once, and I get teary, never once, Greg, did he say, no, I'm too busy. Didn't matter if he had a, gazillion-dollar meeting with Iron Man or Cervelo or, name your Gatorade, Nike. He stopped and took a picture, gave him a hug, told him to keep at it. They were gonna get somewhere if they kept at it. Just an inspiration. Along similar lines, I can remember, I forget, I think it was 2016, 2017. Mark was managing a professional athlete named Tim O'Donnell, T.O.
I had him on the show. He was on the show a few months ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Loved him. Love his wife, Rennie, Miranda Carfrey. As you know, I think Rennie won 3 times in Kona. She's, 5'3" little dynamo of an athlete. Tim is kind of cut from the same cloth as you and I, Greg. He's kind of more easygoing, more sanguine. This was the year that he finished 3rd. And so when you finish, there's like the winners area. And then afterwards, they all tend to get together around the pool at the King K. And I can remember being absolute newbie. Didn't know who was who, didn't know protocol for how to interact with pros. All I knew was that I had an MVP badge that Mark had given me, and I wanted to be there to support him. So I wandered into the pool, and I was blown away. Again, get teary because I love these people stories. Tim O'Donnell came up to me and introduced himself and said, Larry, I hear you're working with Mark. He's my coach. It's so nice to meet you. Come meet Rennie. Come get to spend some time with us. He just welcomed me, which I don't know how many pros you know, but that's one a rarity. Mm-hmm. It's not that they're not nice people. It's just to get to that level in sport, they have to be self-centered. I mean, Mark will tell you, there's nothing more self-centered than a pro triathlete. They have to. It's the reason why Michael Jordan is not known for being the nicest guy, or Tiger Woods is not known for being the nicest guy. They have to block out everything to focus on that singular pursuit of being the best in the world. Tim O'Donnell was the exception. And I've gone on to meet 2 or 3 other folks like that over the last 10, 12 years, but it was such a warm welcome into the industry. And to this day, Tim is on a pedestal. He's just, like Mark, a golden soul. So those were the early years. 2018, 2019, traveling back and forth to China. This is not so much triathlon related as it is cultural. The first time I landed in Shanghai, and I have to profess ignorance, probably went over with a traditional ethnocentric American mindset. Almost felt like when I stepped off the plane, I was going to see people in the gray Maoist tongue uniforms marching in lockstep, with, soldiers all around. No. Pudong, Shanghai Airport, Pudong, was like I was flying into LAX. Getting on the bullet train and going downtown, it was like being on BART in San Francisco. Walking around the street, you heard 50 different languages. There were people from all parts of the world. It was like being in London. It was such an awakening to China on the street versus China in the news and how our government describes China. They're people just like us. They want to find somebody to love. They want to, make a living. They want to put food on the table. They want to love their kids, grow old, be happy. I love the Chinese. Don't necessarily approve of their government or what they're doing. And honestly, 80+% of the Chinese I know also don't approve of their government. They can't say it, but it was just a huge awakening for me. So that was an interesting experience, born of triathlon in China. Another one while I was there was just the strength of networks. Going back to what we mentioned 25 minutes ago now, your Guangxi, it just moves things. English literacy is not necessarily high once you get outside of Shanghai or Beijing or Shenzhen or Changsha or Xiamen, any of the major cities. But leveraging the fact that you've got a friend who can introduce you, the guards immediately drop. And then they'll start trying in English, and I will try my pidgin Mandarin. And again, just the wiles drop, the perceptions drop, the stereotypes drop. And over time, you build strength in those relationships, and then you're able to actually start calling on those people to help you do business. And then, it's relationship based. So that's the 2018, 2019. And then really quick, because I know we've got time, 2022, 2023, love living in Boulder, made some really good friends. As anyone who's lived or lives in Boulder can tell you, incredibly expensive. Not just from a property value standpoint, but property taxes are astronomical, 3 to 8%. It's just cost prohibitive. So my wife and I started looking around, wound up settling on St. George, Utah, which was very interesting to us. We don't hail from a Mormon background. We tend to be a little more left of center. We're fiscally conservative, but socially liberal. So we weren't quite sure how we were going to fit in. Have absolutely loved it. The people here are as kind as anyone I've met, including my origins in South Mississippi. The cost of living is fantastic. And I'm not selling St. George. I'm just telling you, it was eye-opening for us. And we're quite excited about the amount of investment we see, both time and money and energy, for people in the endurance sports space. We've got a lot of triathlon clubs and teams that come to St. George now for their training camps. A lot of folks have been exposed to it because Ironman held their world championship here back in 2021 and 2022. So quite excited about what's going on in the triathlon world here. And then equally excited about some of the changes we're seeing. Triathlon kind of had its heyday in the 90s and the early 2000s. That was back during the day when, Nike was investing in it, and Budweiser. It was the Budweiser Kona World Championship, which is crazy to me that a beer company was triathlon world championship. It's changed, but I think it's changed for good. Now you look at a lot of the triathlon teams, and they're not just these type A, OCD, hard driving executives. It's the 54-year-old mom of 3. The kids are now off in college or they're out and about, and she wants to take better care of herself. And she understands that not necessarily driving your knees and hips into the ground, running 60 miles a week, but maybe doing a little bit of a run, a little bit of a bike, a little bit of a swim is kind of a balanced lifestyle. I'm loving the change where triathlon is now no longer just this elitist sport. It's kind of more the sport for the everyman or the everywoman. And along with that, I think we're improving our knowledge around nutrition and health, wellness on the whole. I hear it at the gym today. The 70-year-old guy is talking about, his macros and, his carbs versus his fat versus his protein. And that's kind of reassuring that, hey, this country that's been dealing with obesity and dealing with, pandemics is actually kind of maybe heading towards something better in our future. So there you go. Sorry, I ramble. So
no, it was really amazing. And to your point, this health consciousness is really improving, and it's technology based, it's information based, but also, and it's one of the things I love about the sport as well. It's like seeing these people would have accomplished something very, very difficult, and what that opens up for them with their goal setting, with their next phase in life. I'm now an ambassador for the Ironman Foundation, and so I get to see it firsthand. I'm proud for you. That's fantastic. Yeah, I was selected, I guess, about a month ago, so I'm super excited for that opportunity.
That's fantastic. And as you know, Tim and Rennie are very active in that. So
yeah. Larry, an audience member wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Super easy. I'm going to give you my personal Gmail address only because the business one's a little more complicated. So it's just my name, larry.upton@gmail.com. I'll give you my business line. It's my mobile, 512-703-0720. I'm perpetually connected. I'll get back to you promptly. Do my best to, if I can't help you, introduce you to someone that can. But yeah, I would welcome any and all inquiries. I believe in giving, Greg, first, and that in turn becomes a rising tide that I think collectively lifts all our boats. So yeah, I don't care what your product, what your service is, where you're at in that company or personal life cycle, reach out. And if it's too early for me, I'll find you an earlier stage person. If it's too big for me and I can't handle it, I'll tell you, hey, you're too big for me. I can't handle it. But yeah, I'm excited to help anybody that's interested in the endurance sports space, particularly who wants to grow sales or grow brand awareness and community engagement here in the U.S. endurance sports market. So,
And Larry, that's truly authentic, right? I mean, thank you for being so generous and open. And it goes back to really the beginning of our conversation where you're talking about intentionally building relationships, right? And having that giving profile really turns into a welcoming outcome, right? And I also loved part of our conversation that we just touched on about how amazing it is that how different people can be from what your perception is. Like, you've always got this perception about what this group of people or what this country is doing. But at the end of the day, when you're walking the streets, it is as if you're in downtown DC or in London, and it's just people being people. And we're kind of losing that a little bit in our society. And so I really appreciate you bringing that sort of to the forefront today during our podcast. Audience members, if you got some value out of the show, please subscribe. Please follow Larry. Find him on all the social media. Larry, it's been awesome having you on the show. I really appreciate your time and the effort you're doing in our industry. It's really remarkable.
thank you for having me, Greg. Again, I tend to ramble, so hopefully it didn't bore anyone too much. And just please know we appreciate you as well, helping highlight those who are aspiring to be leaders in the endurance sports industry. You can see this hair is very gray, and there's a lot of crow's feet here. We all bear our scars from having learned the lessons of, building, launching, managing, hopefully exiting companies. And I think you're doing a fantastic job of trying to showcase folks who are giving their all, to the endurance sports world. So thank you. Thank you for having us, and thank you for what you're doing.
I appreciate that, Larry. It's a pleasure. It's a passion and a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefinduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.